This is the fifth day of this November 2025 7-day session, and we'll continue with the book Illuminating Silence and the words of Master Sheng Yen. And he says, you probably think that you must start climbing by going up, or that you must study to find wisdom. In the perspective of Chan, this is inside-out thinking. Whoever seeks to climb ends up going down. Whoever seeks wisdom falls into confusion. Whoever clings to a goal fails to reach it. He says, where is the highest mountain? In the Karakoram or the Himalayas? In our common sense perspective, we say that the Himalayas are the tallest and the Atlantic perhaps is the deepest. But if you go flying in a satellite, then you get a different view. What then is high? What then is deep? Far or near, tall or short, big or small, these are all relative to the standpoint we adopt. High to an astronaut is altogether different from what high means to an inhabitant of Holland. Usually our mental scope is narrow and limiting. It is as if we create absolute values and scales with which to judge things. On the other hand, with a big enough mind, we do not attach ourselves to common sense conceptions. We can contemplate with an unlimited range. From an earthling's viewpoint, however high one climbs is nothing compared to the altitude of the astronaut's experience. Divers who go deep in rivers cannot conceive of the depths of an ocean. Knowledge is framed by our viewpoint. It is necessarily limited by the scope of intellection. If we spent a whole lifetime accumulating knowledge, it would still be like a termite mound compared to Mount Everest. Of course, some of those termite mounds are pretty tall, but not compared to Mount Everest. It is not at all in the same dimension as wisdom. And what then is wisdom? In the Chan perspective, wisdom is a state that is free from attachments, free from measurement, free from self-reference, and empty of vexation. Cannot be found through accumulation, through adding to a pool of knowledge, or through measuring how far we are ahead of others. On that path, we only pile confusion on confusion. We try to use our ordinary grasping mind to accomplish the task of Zen. It's inevitable that we bring in all our old tools, all our old patterns, and they play out on the mat. And it causes a lot of suffering. There's a passage in another book with Sheng Yen giving talks in another session, really points to this. He says, during the interviews, I've learned that some people are still tense, still struggling with their meditation method. There are those who might have sat well for a few sessions, but the good feeling has not come back, and they search for it in vain. They feel pressed for time, and their mental states have become more harried, impatient, and tense. Not hard to relate to that. said, I've used many metaphors to explain that if you want to arrive quickly, you'll never get there. But many of you are still making trouble for yourselves, looking for pain to suffer. Buddhist practice is polishing your patience and forging your determination. It's a really good summation of what we're really doing. Not here to accomplish something. Polishing your patience, forging your determination. It says when you demand peace of mind, your mind is not at peace. To deal with these afflictions, you need to move the firewood out from under the pot. This means not caring at all. Not caring at all. Acting as if nothing were happening, feeling that there is no harm in being a good for nothing. This is kind of radical advice. The very process of the meditation retreat is itself the result. All you have to do is sit for 7 days. If you do it well, that is one result. And if you do it badly, that is also a result. It's all valuable experience. Don't have your heart set on doing well. Just keep your mind on the meditation method. Don't get upset about oblivion or scattered thoughts. Pain, numbness, aches, itches, let it all happen. If the sky falls, pay no attention. We have to free ourselves to do this work. We have to give ourselves permission to find our own way. Can't be continually looking over our shoulder or comparing ourselves to others, or comparing this sesshin to some other sesshin, or this experience to some other experience. Just right here, right now. Again and again, come back. He says, plunge into this moment like a diver off a springboard. Trust the process. He goes on, in using a koan, we usually focus on just one saying from the story. This saying is the Huado. For instance, in the story of Joshu's Mu, does a dog have Buddha nature or not? The Huado is just, what is Mu? Or simply Mu. We use the Huado like a kind of lens to peer closely into the mind. Yet this is not an intellectual process. We're not saying, for example, who am I or what is Mu in order to pile up descriptions or to elaborate theories. To san the Huado, and san again is that word T''S-A-N, to penetrate, to look into, to investigate. To san the Huado means to look into it, to peer with the mind's eye rather than with the mind's reason. Directly into the moment of experience that is happening right now. Can all do this. People working on a koan. Use the mind in this way. It's just looking directly. It's direct experience. It's not a big deal. It's not some amazing mental contortion. It's looking into the koan. It says, description takes time. It accumulates. It piles up. San has no time, for it occurs in the durationless present. It is a bare looking into the space of the mind, like peering thoughtlessly into a goldfish bowl. There may be movement, sunlight glinting on the scales of fish, but there is absolutely no conceptual examination. There is merely the bare observation itself. It goes on and on. Furthermore, although it may have the form of a question, the mind cannot make a quick intellectual reply. That sort of clever response is quite short-circuited. A fuse is blown somewhere. And he says, such looking generates a great doubt. Can remark here that the looking really comes before the doubt arises. Sometimes we try to reason our way to a doubt, try to tease out the perplexity, but really genuine doubt, the doubt that drives us deeper into the koan, comes from this looking, from this thoughtless looking. This unconcerned looking. Unconcerned with all the time in the world. It says the doubt can become so intense that the mind automatically comes to one place, totally immersed in the paradoxical unresolvability of the Wado. You are lost in the Wado. When you are totally lost, that is Tsan. When this intensity of focus is long sustained, suddenly the whole mass of doubt breaks down, dissolves. That moment is enlightenment. Nothing can be said of what is there then. It is beyond words. He says there is also another method that I do not usually recommend to beginners. It requires a measure of prior practice. This is the silent illumination method of the Guodong school, or the Soto school, advocated particularly by Hongzhi Zhenjue in the 11th century. This was the method favored by the great Japanese master Dogen, who took it to that country where it is known as shikantaza. Actually, it is probably a very ancient method going back to the times of the Indian patriarchs. You might say that it is Tsan without the Wado as a target. You sit gazing silently into experience as it arises. Hongzhi said of it, in this silent sitting, whatever realms may appear, the mind is very clear as to the details, yet everything is where it originally is, in its own place. The mind stays on one thought for 1,000 years, yet does not dwell on any forms inside or outside. In this method, we let the mind go quieter and quieter, immersing itself in its own silence. It's like allowing the water of a pool to become utterly still. Every speck of mud drifts to the bottom, and the water is crystalline in its clarity. This crystalline clarity becomes enlightenment naturally and without effort. Like the method of the koan, this is a wonderfully direct path. And as you see, no knowledge, no attainment. Going on to another talk, Shengyan says, during retreat, the experience of time varies. The first 3 days drag by slowly. Each day may seem as long as a whole year. On the other hand, the last 3 days seem to run past like a swift horse, This is because during the first half of a retreat, participants are neither used to the retreat nor using their method, and they have a hard time. During the second half, both body and mind are adjusted to the retreat, and time seems to pass quickly. In general, this is what happens in Sesshin. As we all have surely experienced, there are exceptions. You can have a hard time anytime. The option is always open. Throw a little firewood under the pot, and you're off and going. It says, do not think that there are only 2 days left, and that because nothing has happened in the first days, you cannot discover anything. If you feel this way, then you may become lax in your effort and feeble in diligence. That would be regrettable and a great mistake. The retreat is like a race. Only when you cross the finish line is the event over. You may manage a spirit in the last seconds and carry off the prize. But you are racing against yourself. Really, we just never know when things turn. If we knew, they wouldn't turn. The best we can do is just to abandon ourselves to the practice, to become accident-prone, alert to what's right in front of us. If it's not right in front of you, it's not what you're looking for. As Dogen said, where else will you find it? And Sheng Yen says, to practice with the method is like climbing a high mountain. You can only say the climb is over when you reach the summit. Perhaps you are climbing the mountain in a thick fog or a cloud. From the beginning, you have no idea how high up you are. You may think you have come no way at all, and then suddenly you arrive. You may think you are nearly at the peak, and then you find further slopes rising before you. All you can do is climb. Without climbing, you will get nowhere. In an act of faith, you simply place one foot before the other. If you believe you are getting nowhere, you will become lax and the climb will exhaust you. On retreat, do not set yourselves particular goals for practice. Just keep going in the right direction. It's really the nature of practice. It's the nature of life. It's what we want out of our practice, to be headed in the right direction. That's enough. All our concern about where we are and when we're going to get somewhere is outside of that, irrelevant to it. I said earlier that Buddhists don't worry about results, they worry about causes. Single-minded absorption in the practice is a good cause. Again, just keep going in the right direction. Every single step is then an act of reaching the goal. Going on is the goal. The goal is in the going. If you run a race and your mind is on the winning post, you split yourself into now and then. If you forget the goal and just place all your attention on the energy of running, you'll suddenly find yourself there. The climber has his mind focused on the summit. He may easily find the climb exhausting and stop halfway, giving up. And continuing with this metaphor, he says, in climbing a mountain, sometimes we encounter a steep slope. At other times, we find a flat area to stroll across. I used to love that when I was climbing a mountain. The wise climber does not take particular notice of these differences. Both the steep slope and the flat area are high in the hills already. Likewise, when we practice, sometimes there arise good conditions and sometimes troublesome ones. If you find yourself in a good place, don't get too happy. There may be steeper slope just ahead. On the other hand, in difficult times, do not get discouraged. The slope will ease off shortly. On retreat, you cannot predict how one sitting session will be from the previous one. You simply have to sit down and find out. Every sitting is a new birth. Really, that's the spirit with which to get back on the mat for the next round. Sit down and find out. When climbing the mountain, you constantly experience differences in slope, differences in the demands made upon your energy and resilience. This goes on until the summit is reached. Similarly, on retreat, do not be too eager for results. Take up an attitude of going forward without seeking anything. Use the ordinary mind to practice diligently. You all need to get a flavor of using the ordinary mind. Zen is quite remarkable, and we take the attitude that everything about it is special. It's remarkable because it's so normal, so practical, so direct. Everything else is fluff. So simple. The Indian sage Ramakrishna said, "You cannot realize truth which is utterly simple without yourself becoming utterly simple." Shengyan goes on, people sometimes feel that all they ever encounter are the steep slopes. They never come across flat areas. What bad luck. Remember, you are indeed tackling a steep mountain. When this is the case, you will need to build stronger foundations for your practice. What are those foundations? Well, weaning ourselves from our habitual thoughts. In the beginning, just noticing those thoughts is important and valuable. And weaning ourselves from our thoughts about our thoughts. You may notice a tendency to be self-critical. And then when you're self-critical of that. Have to step out of the mess. We have to develop confidence, a sense of flow. Have to be okay with things. The teacher, what's his name? It's escaping me. Krishnamurti asked once, "Do you want to know my secret?" And he had an audience of people who had been following around for years, and this was something new, and they all leaned forward, and he said, "My secret is, I don't mind what happens." That's faith, and that's confidence. Whatever comes up, we'll handle it. Can't guarantee we won't suffer, but we'll handle it, and it will pass. Just having that point of view, that ability to go with things as they unfold is the stronger foundation we all need to build. And then he, in the next talk, he turns to Wang Ming, to the verse, and he says, "To exaggerate clumsiness and covet skill does not lead to great virtue. Of much fame but little contribution, their reputation quickly crumbles." And he says, "Many people suffer from feelings of inferiority. Others feel themselves to be very important. They exaggerate their self-respect into aggrandizement. Both of these feelings arise from comparing yourself with others. When you live alone, you find that such feelings arise less frequently." Of course, Sheng Yan lived alone for 6 years. He says, "I do not know how modern psychology analyzes these feelings, but from the viewpoint of the Buddha Dharma, each of these feelings is a different manifestation of the same basic inclination. A person who feels inferior is obviously lacking in confidence, but so is somebody who exaggerates his or her importance and behaves arrogantly. Both inferiority and a sense of superiority come from lack of confidence. You cannot practice well if you lack confidence. You look at others and think how well they must be getting on. You feel as if nobody else has a problem, as if you are the only one sitting there worried and anxious. Sometimes when I find a practitioner troubled in this way, I say, don't be so lacking in confidence. I too came by the same route. When I was young, I also had to endure great difficulties in practice. It was only through hard work and applying the method that eventually I had a tiny bit of understanding. Sometimes such a practitioner says to me, Shifu, how can I compare myself with you? You are a Chan master, so how can I expect to get the same sort of accomplishment? Then there is another kind of person, not so common as the first, who may say to me, Shifu, you are now so old, and I am young. By the time I reach your age, I will definitely have surpassed you. I have a friend who went into Doksan with Roshi Kapleau and said, I shall become a great yogin. Roshi said, you'll never amount to anything, and rang him out of the room. Then he came and told me about it. Sheng Yan says, such a person evidently has great confidence. But then, upon what is this practitioner basing his opinion? How can he be so sure? Actually, even with such confidence, there remains a big problem. The first of these practitioners is putting him or herself down. There's a feeling of inability and inferiority. The second type is filled with arrogance. Of course, I shall be very happy if all my disciples surpass me, but when practitioners show either of these attitudes, I'm not so happy. Neither attitude is helpful in practice. In particular, a person who shows his lack of confidence through arrogance has very little chance of making progress so long as he thinks that way. Of course, that's one of the reasons why Roshi Kapleau blasted my friend. It's a dangerous attitude to take. Don't see much of it these days. Now let me ask you, he's talking to the group here, do you think it possible to be feeling inferior and behaving in a superior manner at the same time? Have you ever manifested such sentiments? I see by the show of hands that many of us recognize such problems. The fact that we can perceive them is already a sign of progress. If you know you have such weaknesses, and yet still you try to cover them up and act as if you were truly confident, then you are like the praying mantis. There's a fable in which the mantis saw a carriage rolling towards it. It raised one of its legs, one of its little legs, to stop the carriage. Actually, it knew very well that such a thing was impossible, but nevertheless, It wanted to put on a show. The mantis is actually very pitiable. Such a pretense of ability is simply a manifestation of self-centeredness. We have to be okay with our limitations. That's why it's important to recognize that I'm an ass. You're an ass. To go around puffed up or feel that you can't ever show any weakness is confining, limiting. Self-centered. He says, of course, there are also people who never try to resolve difficulties. They like to evade a difficult situation as much as possible. Such a person is like the ostrich, sticking its head in the sand and hoping the lion will go away. The truth is that all of us are mantises and ostriches by turns, and we remain thereby in delusion. In the Orient, many people are like this. Perhaps it's the same in the West. Have you not met the man who is approaching 30 and begins to lose his hair? So in case others should notice, he begins combing his hair in such a way that the hair on the left side goes over to the right. We all know at least one person like that. Yet anyone who really takes a look can see at once that he is bald in the center. Of course, if you are a Chan practitioner and you are bald in the center, well, you are bald in the center. My son had a friend we've known for a long time who started balding in his 20s. So he cut his hair short. He called it bald with dignity. A Chan practitioner needs to have this self-knowledge. He should know what sort of an appearance he has and feel at home in it. In whatever situation, you should know how far your ability will carry you. With the ability, you act. Without it, you do not. No fuss, no pretense. The saying goes, comfortable in your own skin. This is such a blessing. It doesn't come quickly or easily, but it does come. Even in the natural course of people's lives, you find in general, older people are more at home with who they are. It's a swear word that describes the situation, but I'll keep my mouth clean. They actually, I remember listening to a podcast examining depression in older people and how resilient they were, and they went in with the assumption that older people having so many problems, and of course the grim reaper standing just around the corner, would be more depressed than younger people. And so they sent people out with some sort of a notepad or whatever, some way of recording what was going on, and periodically they would page them, beep them, and the person would write down what was going on. And what they found out was anxiety and depression were far more frequent the younger you were. And if you actually practice as you get old, you have a good chance of ending your life grateful. One of my friends died not that long ago. Many people here know him, Axel Carries. He worked on Mu his whole life. I wasn't his teacher, but I don't think he was ever passed. but it was inspiring when we held his memorial service and people came from all different parts of Rochester, different groups that he was a part of. Everybody had the same story. Just open, comfortable, helpful, and generous he was. And I saw him when he was in hospice at the end. Others did as well, of course. And he was just uniformly grateful. It was so remarkable. maybe the people in the hospice come to ceremonies more commonly, I don't know. But 3 of them showed up all marveling at what a good death he had. If you want to have a goal, maybe that would be a good one. I want to have a good death. Of course, it's not in our control. You might die in some horrible, embarrassing accident. He says, when I came to this retreat, I knew that many of you were well educated with degrees in psychology and other subjects. I didn't think about it much or trouble to look up these subjects in books and prepare myself for questions about this or that. I did not prepare myself at all, in fact. I just came over. Here I am. I can tell you what I know. If there are things I cannot answer, so what? We can still talk together. The important thing is to recognize ourselves for what we are. Just recognize whatever you are, whatever abilities or inabilities you have, and accept yourself. There's no need to get vexed over comparisons. If you can manage this, you will become firm in character, more healthy, and at peace. I think that's a good place to leave off. I said last night that the sesshin had found a dip, and it really seems to have turned around today, as I predicted and partly believed. It's going to always be up and down. We're always going to find steep slopes. And regardless of how well we understand the methods of practice, and how many times it's been drilled into us, we're going to get caught up in old patterns, old karma, old stories. Just give it time. Trust the practice, trust the process. Keep going. It's all we're here for. It's just to go, just to do this. We do it for everyone. We do it for ourselves. We do it for our family, our friends. Do it for others here in the Zendo. Do it for the people online, with us on Zoom. And we're doing it for people in Mexico, where Dara Sensei is leading sesshin. Yes, we'll stop here and recite the 4 vows.